Welcome to the and climate change in this program, mainly about South Asia, but South Asia being a very, very important part of this global world, so we discuss globe at large. And today we'll be discussing an issue which has been raging for years, but recently you all know that in the Uttarakhand state of India, there has been a major disaster. The glacial lake opened up and people died. Many are still not being found. And many think that in that part of the India, which is the mountain part, Himalayan part, the series of hydroelectrics which have come up are responsible. At the same time, with thermal power, due to climate change going pushed back, hydropower is considered by many as an option, as an environment-friendly option. So it's a double-edged weapon, to do or not to do, the proverbial question. And today we'll be discussing that, hydropower, whether it's a boon or a bane. And I have a fabulous panel to discuss this. I have with me, if I can start with Dr. Dipak Gyawali. Dipak Gyawali is I think he needs little introduction. Former Minister of Water Resources in Nepal, extremely erudite and extremely important political economist in the region, hydroelectric power engineer by profession. So no more introduction, sir. It's a privilege to have you in the program.
Hi.
I have with me Professor A.P. Dimri. He's a professor in School of Environmental Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, India. And also he's, I think, the coordinator for the Upper Indus Basin India chapter part. So a very, very important technocrat and really an important part of today's discussion. Professor Dimri, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have with me Professor Badrul Imam from the University of Dhaka. He's a professor of geology and works, I think, a range of issues in this part, and really would like to know from him the scenario in the lower riparian in Bangladesh in context of the discussion we are going to have. And very important, from Nepal also, we are having Dr. Arun Shrestha, senior climate change specialist and a program manager for ICIMOD. ICIMOD is such a household name to people who follow the climate change issues in the region. Welcome, Dr. Shrestha, to the program, and really would like to know the climate change perspective of this whole discourse. So an absolutely important contribution to make in the program. Welcome, Dr. Shrestha.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And this is the panel for me right now. Some may add down the line, but let me start with Dr. Dipak Gyawali. Dr. Gyawali, this agenda of hydropower and how you qualify it, whether it's a boon or a bane, because at one side is being considered as one of the options, with thermal power being pushed back with this climate change consideration. On the other side, especially in the Himalayan region, the series of hydropowers are being considered the reason for environmental and ecological distress. How you say it?
The answer lies somewhere in between. It's none of these extremes, okay? I want to start off by making just 3 propositions, and we'll take this debate forward as we go on. First of all, rivers of the Himalaya uh, are drainage channels that carry not just water but a heck of a lot of matter. So, water and matter, I keep saying, are co equal passengers here. We seem to forget that when we design hydropower plants. Second proposition is, water is more important than electricity. Now, we forget that. And electricity, hydroelectricity becomes competitive, you know, and feasible only when the cost is spread between water users, whether they are irrigation, navigation, fisheries, whatever, and electricity users. Unfortunately, we've designed our hydropower plants across the Himalaya as if it's only electricity, and it's too expensive to compete with other sources right now. Okay, unless you put a ban on coal or whatever, it's the other sources are still going to be much cheaper. And the third proposition I want to bring in here is that the moment you say water, and water is an extremely important part of it, oftentimes ignored in the development of hydroelectricity, it immediately means that water and electricity are public goods, not so much private goods. And our problem has been to treat electricity and hydroelectricity development as a purely private good. And it is obvious that the market cannot manage this only. It needs strong societal intervention, failing which we get a market failure on this count. I'll stop with that for the time being and have few other things to
Uh,
add.
before I let you go for the first time, Nepal has been. I was going through the data. I was going through the data of Nepal. I find that Nepal is the main source of energy in Nepal. About 90% of your installed capacity comes from hydropower, and you have about, I think, 746 megawatt uh, kind of installed capacity. But what is more important that you are talking about, the government of Nepal is talking about a target of 10,000 megawatt of hydropower development in next 10 years. And I recently spoke to the Bangladesh minister, Dr. Hassan Mahmood. Is a good friend of mine for a long time when he happened to be the environment minister of Bangladesh. And he was talking about that Bangladesh and Nepal are also talking regarding these hydropower issues. How you see this? This 10,000 megawatts is a huge number.
It's a very populous number. There's a 400 megawatt plant that's been continuously being built and still not completed almost for the last decade now. So if it takes you, almost 10 years to build a 400 megawatt plant, how are you going to get to that number that you talk of? Number one. And number two, our figures have changed quite dramatically. The 700 megawatt figure you mentioned is what the government utility
Yes.
uh, produces. The private sector in Nepal has grown amazingly fast over the last 15, 20 years. And the private sector right now produces, in capacity terms, more electricity than the government sector. Okay. Now, and more interesting, the government sector having failed to do the transmission connections, a lot of the private sector electricity is wasted. They're not able to sell to the grid. And there's a huge problem because their money is sunk. But at the same time, we are importing, currently in winter right now, I'm telling you, more than half our electricity comes from coal-fired Jharkhand electricity from India. Now, this is the irony in Nepal, you see. So keep that in mind.
That's absolutely fascinating. That one side you're talking about hydropower, you're talking about expanding it to 10,000 megawatt, and the other side you are bringing thermal power from India. So that's very amazing. So let's go to Professor Dimri here. Professor Dimri, Indian scenario. If you look at the Indian data and Indian scenario, uh, India installed capacity is about 371 gigawatt as of December 31st, 2019. And cumulative hydropower installation is about 50 gigawatt. And it's about 13.5% of India's total installed power capacity. But India is talking about more and more and more. And we all know that how this whole controversy about having more and more thermal power in Sikkim, in higher echelons of Himalaya has been happening. So how you see it, and you also see what's happened in Uttarakhand. So how you see it, Professor Dimri?
Jayanta, there are two, three things. I think in Indian context, these numbers in time, they reference checked again and again. And in particular, when you talk of hydropowers in Indian conditions, we have a very different geology and geography. If you are talking on down south, if you are talking on up, so they are not homogeneously decided all across the nation.
Sure.
So definitely they are having a reference terms which are maintaining different ratios, different numbers when we are talking hydropower at location up and down. However, coming to the discourse over the Himalayan region and the development in particular over hydropower over this region, well, we have to remember that our own agency, Geological Survey of India, has provided a good report that which region is landslide prone, which region is a geologically unstable. And if you go more in the past, interestingly, you will find that Himalayan upfront is not a tectonic mountain. It's a Shivalik is a sediment mountain, whereas if you go higher Himalaya, that is the tectonic mountain where the tectonic comes. And today itself, I read a research very recent that monsoon, which in my understanding came 15 million years back, based on Bay of Bengal study, they say it's a 27 million years back. So because of that, Shivalik came in front. Now most of the Shivalik is a habitat region where most of the disaster is happening. So I'm not telling disaster doesn't happen deep inside in higher Himalaya. It might be, but since it's not affecting habitat, so it's not a disaster. Hydropower, when it is getting managed in the present disaster, earlier also there are many hydropowers got damaged. There should be a backward calculation by the engineers must be done, how much capacity it will go. Because I'm not an engineer per se, but I understand these factuals.
Okay.
So in these scenarios of where it's hitting the disaster, and if you are keep making such dams across these regions, such hill states where you don't have the flat land, it will be very, very difficult for them to coexist with the hydropower. Of course, hydropower is needed because of the development point of view.
Yes.
But simultaneously, if the valley where this happened, I have visited there, each 2 kilometers, they were having drilling, they were having marked mini or micro hydropower. When I went there 5 to 10 years back, and returned to the capital of Dehradun, I told, do we need such kind of investigation just for a hydropower point of view? And if it is so, what's going to happen to the downstream? And I'm telling this 5-10 years back, I repeatedly when I am 2-3 times. So there are 2 issues comes into this. There is a lack of policy integration based on the information, whatever is provided, not even by educated person like me. Even a villager is telling, see, this is an irony of our state that 1950 years back, where a simple lady, late Miss Gaura Devi, started a Chipko Andolan, which narrated the worldwide attention. The same village, Rani village.
Absolutely. I think you have hit the nail.
So
you have hit the nail. The Uttarakhand, where we have the Chipko movement, and I had the privilege of asking Sundarlal Bahagunaji, and he said how he left the formal politics to join the social movement. He happened to be the UP president at that point of time of Congress, and at that period, UP president sometimes automatically translates into Indian Prime Minister. But he left that to join social movement, the Chipko movement, and rest was history. And there we have this Uttarakhand. Yes, Professor Dimri, please tell. I think this is a very important point you are making.
This is a very paradoxical for me. You know Sundarlal Bahuguna, you know then Chandi Prasad Bhaji, you know late Gaura Devi. So that's what I mean to state, that a common man need not to be educated to provide certain inheritance, subtle signatures into the planning and proposition. So which is absolutely, and many times, not only in dam context, I am telling, I am working in Himalaya past many years. Like in another example now, I give Dr. Prakash.
Let me, Professor Dimri, I'm coming back to you, but let me bring others into the discussion. That will make it more interesting. Let me bring first Dr. Shrestha into it, and then I'll come to the lower riparian after the upper riparian being completed. Dr. Shrestha, you are a climate change expert. At the same time, I understand you were a glaciologist. You were a glacier expert. And Professor Dimri and also Dr. Gyawali was talking about these agendas. How do you see this whole development of hydropower in Nepal and India? How do you see this as a climate expert? But at the same time, you also have to remember we need to minimize the thermal power, and hydropower is seen as an option. So how do you do the marriage?
No, true. I think to go back to your original question, whether hydropower is a boon or bane,
yes, absolutely.
I think, well, the region needs energy, right? Energy is a requirement, and we need energy which is, environmentally friendly, greener energy. So the question is whether hydropower is green enough or not. I think it's all about relativeness, compared to definitely coal-fired powerhouses. Hydropower is definitely, it doesn't emit greenhouse gases, sulfur, etc. So in that way, it is green. But it is totally green or not, I think that's a question we need to deal in this panel as well. Probably we'll do that later. I think my position on hydropower is, it can be both boon and it can be bane, depending on how you do it, what you do with it, and where you do it. And these are the details very important before one says whether, you have to go, in all way develop hydropower or stop developing hydropower totally. We should not do that. I think that is the position I'm taking. Now, related to climate and other issues, I think, first of all, let me say, like Dipak ji already mentioned about, the hydrology and everything like that. Definitely, the basic requirement for hydropower is you need water to run it, right? So the more quantum of water, more you can generate. But then, apart from quantum, the terrain is also very important, right? So steeper terrain allows us to generate more, even with less amount of water. I think that's where the comparative advantage of mountain lies in, because mountains have steep terrain, and within a very short distance, you can generate that, dynamics within water and generate energy, right? But then also together with that terrain, there are a lot of challenges, right? And that we know, also from the recent example from Uttarakhand, there are flash floods, there are, natural hazards like landslides, Glove, you name it, right? So there are challenges and opportunities while, thinking about hydropower in a mountain context. So business as usual, what we do in the plain, we cannot replicate in the mountains. There has to be a different, kind of thinking when we talk about hydropower as well as any kind of infrastructure development in this region. Now, coming to climate, I think we all know the climate is changing very dramatically, right? And the Hindu Kush Himalaya as well, where Uttarakhand, Nepal, and the mountain regions lie, are more sensitive in climatic sense also. The warming which is happening is being accelerated in the mountain regions, right? And it is going to continue in the future. Besides warming, the whole suite of climate is also changing, including the precipitation pattern. And what is, being absorbed, but also not only observed by, but also perceived by people, like what Dimri ji had mentioned, is that the erraticness of, precipitation.
Dr. Shrestha, is that exactly the question? With this erratic climate change coming to the picture, with the skewed rainfall pattern and everything being changing around, when you have built up this hydropower structure, regime of hydropower, you have depended on certain meteorological parameters. But now with these parameters changing, how sustainable they are, that's a big question. I'll come back to you with that question, that with parameters changing, the rainfall changing, how viable they are, or they will be in, say, maybe 20 years down the line. So that's a very valid question, and I'll come back to you on that question. But before that, let me bring lower riparian country Bangladesh into this discussion. Professor Imam, Bangladesh, I think, have minimum hydropower. You don't have much hydropower. I was going through the data. I find that Bangladesh has only one hydropower plant like that. But this hydropower in the upper part of the river is definitely impacting the water flow down the line to you. So how you see this whole hydropower game, so to say?
Well, thank you, Jayanta. You are right that I am taking a backseat in this discussion because Bangladesh has the electricity
But the impact
generation.
is coming to you, so you have to
Yeah,
also take
yeah,
a front
that's right.
stance.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. You are correct in saying that Bangladesh electricity generation is only 1% that is being used by hydropower.
Okay.
And that is with a great cause because you see, we have one hydropower plant in Chittagong Hill Tract. That is an area, only area where there are hilly terrain. Rest of the country, about 90% of it, absolute flat. There is no question of building any hydropower there. So in 1962, one hydro power plant was built in Kornafuli River, that is the largest hilly river. And that created a lake which has displaced 100,000 Chakma tribal people. And
Yes.
it inundated 550 square kilometer of land. So from that point of in time, Bangladesh never thought of going for a second hydropower. So it is right for you to point to the outside hydropower's effect in Bangladesh, right? Because inside we have already been inundated with the bad effect of the hydropower in Chittagong Tracts. In that question, what happens? What effect this outside hydropower have in Bangladesh? You see that there is a unsettled dispute still raging between India and Bangladesh government about the Tista River, because the Tista is originated in Himalaya in Sikkim, or
Yes.
probably further north.
And there are a series
And
of
it goes
hydropowers
through Sikkim, through the West Bengal and into the Bangladesh. So the point Bangladesh is suffering is that it has no water in winter. This is drying up. It is drying up very fast, and there are large sand dunes in the Bangladesh Tista River.
And you feel hydropowers are responsible for that?
I do think that this is one of the main reasons why the Indians are having very, very difficult to solve this problem, because you see, the Indian counterpart has all the goodwill to solve this problem, because this is a problem which really hurts Bangladesh. But in the ground, the reality in West Bengal probably,
There's no water.
It's no water in their side also. And the
In
whole
fact,
thing,
here I interrupt because that's a very interesting point being raised. And this is such a contentious issue with Dr. Gyawali is also here and all of you are here. I had the opportunity of looking at this so-called kind of exclusive report that the government of West Bengal prepared, and I actually wrote about it, is that the amount of water that West Bengal needs and Bangladesh cumulatively need at non-monsoon period, this actually had 1/16 of that water. So there's no water in the river.
right. Now,
So
the point is
I
that
don't.
why is that? I know that these experts know exactly how many hydropowers is that. My guess is that it's not less than 20, maybe 20 and more hydropower is running in Sikkim and West Bengal. So if you put that much of barrier into the natural flow of the river, I mean,
And it becomes a problem.
It's a problem, yes. Sure.
Okay, I'll be coming to the policy of Bangladesh government about to integrate hydropower and other issues. But let me go to, again, Dr. Gyawali on this. Dr. Gyawali, we have heard from all of you, I think all of you have kind of agreed that we need hydropower, but we need to use it in a judicious way. It's neither fully Boon nor fully Bane. It's somewhere in between, as you said. But very important point Dr. Shrestha made, that we need to know how you are going to use it. What is our policy? But looking at Nepal, Bhutan, India, do you see this kind of a proper holistic policy to use hydropower, or it is just like a first gear or fourth gear? Either you are in first gear or in fourth gear. So how you see this, Dr. Gyawali?
Okay, I would suggest that all of us actually look at a wonderful report that came out of Delhi Asia Foundation, written by Aditya Pillai and Sagar Prasai, about a year and a half, 2 years back. Okay, it's called The Price of Power. If you just Google Asia Foundation, you get it. But it's an amazing political economic study of hydropower, which shows that there's a big problem. India currently has surplus generation, and it looks like government of India is not going to be buying power from neighbors, okay, for the coming 10 years, and not even from Arunachal, where a lot of Indian hydropower is being developed. Okay, that's the first thing. Second, the what Arunji mentioned, it's very correct, but I want to take that point into hydropower with climate change. We know climate change is happening. Okay, it's causing all kinds of beginning to show all kinds of impacts already. It'll get worse as the years proceed. But in terms of hydropower, one very fundamental thing that's missed often is that climate change is telling us, telling all of humanity, that the future is not going to be like the past. Something is fundamentally changed in our atmosphere, in our weather, in our season. I mean, all kinds of crazy things. Okay. Now, what this means for hydropower is we design hydropower plants, based on, old hydrology. That is, we look at, last 10, 15, 20, whatever years of data. Our data is bad as it is, and do some analysis, fancy statistical analysis, regression analysis, and try to predict the probability of what will happen in the future, once in 100-year, 1,000-year flood, and so on, based on past data. Now, there's a philosophical problem here now. If climate change is telling us that the future is not going to be like the past, then the design criteria that we use to design our dam, our gates, our spillways, and so on, based on past hydrological data, is going to be meaningless.
That's the point I was raising with
Yeah,
Dr. Shrestha.
Exactly. And so now what this means, now the policy implication of this is pretty simple, actually. What this means is, you heard about small is beautiful. Now, I'm one of those who argue that beautiful is beautiful, small or big, okay? The only difference is big is more risky. So in terms of hydropower, there are two things that we should probably be doing, and Dr. Shrestha is very right when he says that it can be a boon or a bane depending on how you do it, okay? Do it badly, it will be a disaster. Do it properly, it can be a blessing, okay? The two things you got to do is, first of all, don't put all your eggs in one big hydropower basket, one big project. Try to build smaller projects spread out all over, because landslides and floods, massive floods, don't happen in all the basins at once all the time, okay? They happen in 1 year, another one 3 years down the road, and all. So if your hydropower is spread out in smaller, medium scale dams, then you spread out your risk. Okay, that's the first thing. And the second thing is that we had a big conference in the Karnali Basin once with all the environmentalists and all. And one of the conclusions we came to is this: avoid dams in the mainstream of the river. Much of the damage you saw in Uttarakhand was actually right on the, sir. Now, mainstream, you can still build dams there, but, leave it for the time being and build dams in the tributaries. If you build dams in the tributary, at least for our immediate needs, at least in Nepal's case, Karnali, for example, has something like 17,000 megawatts potential, okay, Karnali River Basin. But just the tributaries alone have at least 6,000. And that's more than what we need for the current generation Nepalis. Okay, and leave the mainstream Karnali alone, because most of the flood, most of the the surge of massive flows and all happens on the mainstream. So avoiding dams on the mainstream means that you probably be safer.
So that's a suggestion, a very concrete suggestion, that you avoid the mainstream and try to do the tributaries. Okay, great. Professor Dimri, along with what Dr. Gyawali mentioned, I personally have seen that there are issues like what to do, how to do, and the policy. But apart from the bare legalities, many of these hydropowers, especially the private hydropowers, they are basically rip and run institutions. They're just being there, make an investment, try to make 20 times money out of it, knowing fully well that it is going to be there for 10, 15 years and then run away. If you go to Sikkim and look after power, after hydropower, and hydropower, and look how they're completely kind of violating all norms under the sun. So how do you see it that this whole process of illegality being linked with this hydropower process, particularly this kind of the hydropower in the private sector, how do you look at it?
Generally, if you look at the strategy of these hydropower energy demand is for humankind. And this design of hydropower is generally run of the river, reservoir river, or pump of the river. These are the three most studied. Third one is not very oftenly done. Most disastrous hydropower failure from such point of view is run of the river disasters. Particularly in that case, what happens that when you are unable to assess that how much rivulet can take this load of runaway water, which happened in this case, many other cases, and that's where such kind of a minor scale or larger scale water disaster can happen. I'm not going on the geopolitics of the numbers or which Dipak ji or which Imam ji has told. The issue in particular, the Himalayan geology, as far as the run of the river or the reservoir dam is concerned, in particular the prone of the earthquake, cloudburst, and in changing time, we have already published one work that in the northern Indian eastward flowing rivers in western Himalaya, central Himalaya in particular, the river flow will double in next 50 years.
Okay.
After those next 50 years, the water mass which is coming from the glaciated volume will be depleting slowly, and even the eastward running river like Ganges, Yamuna, and tributary of that will be devoid of the water coming. Now the question comes, for how long duration we are going to build this hydropower to generate the energy in per se using water. If there is a fluctuation in water capacity in the reservoir and or the run of the river, or still we are going to have those kind of hydroelectric issues or not?
Absolutely. I think here's a very quick supplementary point I would like to make. The so-called run-of-the-river projects. If you look at those, you'll find that they keep the water about 20 hours to 22 hours stagnant. And then they only allow the water to pass at the evening time when, because you know that in India now the power is excess. So if you sell power at inopportune time, you're not going to get money out of it. So you are only going to sell it at the opportune time in the evening when the demand peak is high. And what you are doing, you are
Yes, that is true.
It's not the case.
That's not the true case. I was coming to that. And in the run of the river technology, what happened that government has given this kind of a small microhydel to the individual villages where sarpanchs are running this. Now the trick of the trade is instead of running on a falling water or running on the river, they are blocking the rivulet for a longer period of time. Now they are taking two prices out of it. One is they are selling the water for the agriculture in the later time, and whole day they are stopping the electricity, and then they are selling electricity also. So it has a very many manifestation on the society. I'll not go in those details, but yes, that's a kind of a policy it should be inculcated. Of course, that's what is my take on that. Yes,
I have the feeling that the institutions are turning the Boon into a Bane actually.
yes,
It's all about the institutions turning it around. Let me go to Dr. Shrestha. Dr. Shrestha, the question I asked and the question that Dr. Gyawali had been repeated, that with the climate change and the parameters going haywire, how do you think that this hydropower is being built up with this data, old data, and we keep on doing that? How sustainable they will be in the first place?
Right. Well, thanks. But before going to that, Jayanta, let me say this. We as an institution, ICIMOD, we work for mountains and mountain people, and we try to see how the livelihoods of people in the mountains can be supported, right? And hydropower could be a possibility. We all think of it, right? So we have been working on this issue, how to make hydropower more sustainable.
Okay.
And, sustainable, of course, is a big word. And therefore, we need to go a little bit deeper into that word and try to find out what are the sustainability components, right? The other way of putting is what are the challenges to the sustainability? And that we know in engineering or economics as risks. what are the risks to hydropower in this region? And that's where we think the clue lies in to turn the Bane into Boon probably is to look how to make hydropower sustainable or minimize the risk. And for that, we have just published a paper in International Journal of Water Resources Development. The title is The Role of Hydropower in South Asia's Energy Future. And that's where we have tried to deal on this. Now, when we look at the risk framework to hydropower, there are four main pillars. One is, of course, the finance part, right? And the second is technology part. And these are the part in current, context, most of the developers and including government look at, right? That is the first thing they look at, whether the hydropower is feasible from financial angle and technical angle. What is neglected quite a lot is the environmental pillar and the social pillar. And we know hydropower has big environment footprint and social footprint also, right? But then now concentrating on environment, which also is related to your question of climate change, is that, hydropower and environment is connected by bidirectional arrow. It is not unidirectional, right? So we talk quite a lot, and in this panel also we have talked quite a lot about hydropower impacting environment because of its scale, because of alteration of the flow, because of inundation, etc. It impacts the environment. That is one side of the arrow. But we know, and also from this current example from Chamoli flood, is that environment heavily impacts hydropower, right? So that is where we need to.
And Dr. Shrestha, just to add on to that, this environmental impact also has a huge economic impact. When Uttarakhand 2013 episode happened, it was around 14,000 crores INR, Indian currency at that point of time. And this time the primary estimate, a very primary estimate, is saying about 1,500 crores. So it's not only environment per se, also indirectly via environment, you are also incurring a lot of economic cost, and which is actually being passed on to your people. So it's not really environment only, it's also economics.
These are interlinkages. Of course, you cannot see those pillars in isolation. They are definitely interlinked. But now, concentrating on environment, of course, the natural fragility of the environment is well known. You don't know. There are so many surprises in the nature, like the one we have seen, that nature poses, that we do not understand. So the uncertainty is very high. But then superimposed now on it is climate change. And it has been already discussed what kind of, challenges climate is going to, pose to us in the future. It's not only a gradual change, right? It is the erraticness. It is the heavy variability that is.
I just have a quick question here. That you talked about that environment and social aspects are often not being kind of considered the way it should have been. Now, say is the Nepal government, or say if you look at the South Asian scenario, are the governments in South Asia, do you think that they are started considering those, or they're still being kind of completely zeroed on the financial and the technical part?
Well, I would say, it is being discussed quite a lot, right? If you talk about environment, for example, environmental impact assessment is there, right? A standard procedure related to environmental impact assessment is there. Which embeds the social impacts, right? That is also a little bit of dilemma that
I think that's very important, Dr. Shrestha. Let's bring Professor Imam here. Professor Imam, Bangladesh is a river-based country. And all of your rivers, mostly you are in the lower riparian, so it's coming up from the Himalayas and all these regions. So as a government, what do you think the Bangladesh government is planning now or plans to do in context to this whole issue of hydropower? because Bangladesh also, though is a green in terms of various contexts of climate change, also harping quite a bit on the thermal power as well. So how your take on Bangladesh policy, the energy policy right now?
Well, you see, Bangladesh historically has been using natural gas as a prime energy source. You see, as late as 2010, Bangladesh used to generate 90% of its electricity by the natural gas, which was fine, which was ideal actually.
Okay,
you see,
absolutely.
Environmental wise, actually, it's much better than coal, and coal is also it takes a very minor part of electricity generation. But the situation is being changed now because the depletion of gas resources has been taking place. It's been observed. And so Bangladesh started building large coal-based power plants. So in that respect, it is probably going a little backward rather than forward if we compare the scenario of green life and green future. So you see, but one thing, the question that you just asked, that what Bangladesh could do about the hydropower surrounding areas. I mean, I'm not sure how Bangladesh can influence or play active role in controlling or regulating those kind of plans and I mean executions. You have Farakka in one hand, it's a long story, and then you have Tista coming up. There is Tipai Dam in this Tripura in the east. So you see, it is cropping up all the times, and the cumulative effect of these, I mean, negative effect of these, is not yet there. But there is a ground. It's already there. If all this hydropower start working, then what Bangladesh has to do with that? We have seen that the negotiation with regards to this Tista water sharing never talk about other than the water sharing. But I think there's one component which can be added. Well, you have that much of hydropower. Just let us negotiate with power.
Exactly. That's a very important point.
So that is an added component in addition to the sharing of water. So that may be give the negotiation table much ease than just sticking only to the water sharing, because water is less even in India, in the Indian part of Tista. So it has to be disciplinary sort of discussion of.
So you feel that government of Bangladesh should engage much more proactively on this issue of hydropower, and particularly the hydropower plants, being series of them being made in the upper part, because they are going to influence your water resources in a very, very significant way.
Of course, I think that is one component Bangladesh should be talking seriously.
Should start talking about.
Yeah, because you see, Bangladesh has been in touch in negotiation, and MOU has been signed with Bhutan and Nepal for purchase of hydropower. So why not then Tista as a test case? I mean, more importance on Tista hydropower rather than going for other new.
I think that's very, very important. I think that's a new angle to this whole, I would say, the power politics, so to say, power politics in South Asia. We're coming to the end of this program, but let's coming to the last round with Dr. Gyawali. Dr. Gyawali, we have understood the Boon and Bane factor to a certain extent. I would not say totally, but to a certain extent. But how you see the whole hydropower being rolled out maybe 15, 20 years down the line? Because whatever we see, thermal power is going to be cut down. Solar has definitely come up, but solar has its own issues. Wind power is limited in expression. So hydropower is definitely a very, very important cog in the wheel. So having said that, how you see the hydropower being rolled out, but especially in South Asia? We all know how Mekong controversy of the hydropower plants, but in this part of this world, India, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and its whole area, how you see this being rolled out in future?
Well, I see there's definitely going to be more development because we take the case of Nepal. It depends on which figures you use, but coverage of electricity can be, depending on whom you ask, as low as 60% only. with 40% people still not having access to electricity. Well, you look at other figures and they say, oh, we have achieved 95% coverage, but one transformer in one village giving this thing to 5 houses, and then considering that the whole district has got electricity,
Yes, that
well,
happens in
there's a
India as
big
well.
problem with these counting issues. Okay, now, so there is going to be development. There's no doubt about it. The question is it going to be good development, healthy development, or maldevelopment, as I call it? Okay. Now, in this, I see one has very little sense of hope, because you're not seeing the governments actually becoming responsible governments on this proactively. Okay, let me give you one example, and that probably tells you everything. Okay? Now, we all talk of e-flows, right? So when you build a hydropower plant, you're supposed to leave 10% flow in the river. Well, it depends, whatever it is, however that's calculated. I've gone around, many hydropower plants in the districts and all, and talked to them in the dry season. Nothing is left. It's dry.
Right.
So you ask them, and they say, and these operators, they say, listen, sir, we like to be nice guys and do the right thing. Okay, we want to leave 10%, but our agreement with the government is such that we are fined if we do not provide this minimum of electricity. Now the flow in the river has gone much below that. Okay, so if we leave 10%, we'll be fined. Okay. Now they say that, and so I said, but you could still leave the water there and pay the fine. It says, no, sir. The issue goes like this. Our electricity that we produce and transmit to the grid is instantly monitored and metered right away. Okay. So the guys at the center can see immediately whether we are providing electricity every second at the desired level or not. Nobody comes to monitor e-flows,
Absolutely.
So if somebody comes to monitor and they tell us, you bad guys, you haven't done this and fines us, then we'll pay the fine, But right now we have to take a risk. So now you see what I'm driving at is that, yeah, you may have nice high sounding laws and, regulations and policies and EIAs and all that, But in practice, what we have is the entire hydropower industry is actually driven less by energy considerations of companies and more by construction contract profits, okay, and equipment import. So most
very strong words. I think very important words.
And the ice melting is actually putting them in danger because they don't have habitat.
Places are taking extra precautions to help prevent climate
trying to stay afloat on ice harms humans. All the ice is melted, so it was
that exist
drowning.
In the Earth's atmosphere. These gases are used to protect us from the sun.
It's very strong.
Companies are making their money not by selling electricity for the next 20 years from a hydropower plant. They're making money right during the construction.
As I said, the rip and run method, the rip and run model.
So this is where the problem is, but I'm not seeing governments. I mean, Nepal government is a disaster on this count, but India government is no better. You know,
absolutely.
One would have thought India government, at least, you know, with all the experience and all that, and you know, the strong administration and all that, would have done better. But no, sadly, it hasn't. So this is where the future of hydropower. There is going to be more hydropower, but is it going to be good hydropower or bad hydropower?
And you feel it's more of a bad hydropower as of now.
Absolutely.
Before coming to India, let me quickly go to Dr. Shrestha. Very quickly, Dr. Shrestha, you were talking about the issues of that how it should be done and all this kind of good things. But as Dr. Gyawali been pointing out, that there's hardly any policy at the government end, and even there is a policy, there's virtually no implementation. So if it's a situation, ground level reality is that, how you propose to have good hydropower? Dr. Shrestha.
Right. Well, Jayanta, I would like to be optimistic. You know,
we all look like to be optimists.
Yeah.
And I do believe.
I would say pragmatically optimist. Pragmatically optimist.
Right. That's the word. I agree. Hydropower will develop in the future, and that is needed. Even with solar and even with wind, hydropower has to be there to balance the energy system, right? We know that. And the benefit of hydropower is, you know, you can generate when you want, right? That's what you said, you know, run off the river, you know, they stop it and then run it. That you cannot do for other kind of energy sources. So I definitely think hydropower will develop. We will continue to make mistakes for some time. And I do have hope that, you know, the judicious thinking about hydropower development will prevail. The reason I am telling that is because, of course, you know, the amount of debate around hydropower, you look at it, it has, you know, escalated to a quantum level higher right now. That also is an
that
indicator.
Will create a lot of pressure.
It will. And let me add to that, you know, just giving example of Nepal, of course, you know, things are not going on well, but there are definitely certain steps being taken in hydropower also. We have worked on exclusively environmental impact assessment guideline for hydropower sector, which was lacking. And the authorities are keen on trying to see how to implement it. You know?
Okay. I think that's I think a bit of a hopeful thing that authorities are at least taking considering the points. At least that's where things we hold hope that.
I do think, you know, with pressure and with support, of course, not only pressure, but also support technically, you know, with knowledge, with understanding.
Things can improve. Okay. Let's see the Indian position. Professor Dimri, how hopeful you are?
Hydropower electricity projects will remain. That's a need. When we have a briefly take a comparison with the West, we have more stress because of our population. We have to understand this. I am not an economist. There is a lot of economy involved in this context by virtue of constructing the dam, selling the contract, right till last when you sell the electricity. And not only amongst the nations, it's within the federal state, within India, you know that, Jayanta. There is a huge kind of different opinions are there. But still with this context, my take on this, well, this is not our domain to decide how the hydropower electricity dams should be run. My only suggestion would be that how good they could be from environmental impact point of view, keeping in view such disasters. These are happening repeatedly without unknowing hydroelectricity issues. That should be in order to contain these disasters, not to prevail in the future, because again, there is some hidden cost is there. So somehow in the down the line, with the context of changing emissions, climate change, these impacts will be increasing, and that should be kind of countered in the context of this debate. So that is my kind of a.
That's your kind of feeling what's going to happen. I'll conclude with Professor Imam. Professor Imam, having heard all the panelists say Nepal and India are major players in the hydropower, and as I said, that Bangladesh, being a lower riparian country, are feeling the brunt of it in a way. Do you feel that the time is ripe when the government of Bangladesh, in extension of the last question, they should open up the discussion about not only, now they are only talking about the power, that we are not getting water from this stuff. We are not getting enough water due to Farakka barrage. But there should be discussion also on the hydropower impact on the rivers. And that point should be raised by the government of Bangladesh in the future negotiations, especially in climate negotiations, with Glasgow coming up this November. And as Dr. Shrestha pointing out, and everybody pointing out, that climate change has a great bearing on the future of hydropower. So do you think that that's coming up? Very quickly, we are just in the final point.
You see, although Bangladesh is, internally don't have this hydropower, but what is planned in future is that the energy mix from the contribution from hydropower will increase. Bangladesh is planning 9,000 megawatt of power import from India, Nepal, and Bhutan. And definitely from Nepal and Bhutan, those electricity will be the hydroelectricity for sure. So in the long run, Bangladesh will be with the hydropower in some way. You see the nation at present generates 20,000 megawatts. In 2030, the power demand will be 30,000, and 2040 it will be 50,000. So that kind of electricity, for that kind of electricity produced and availed, Bangladesh have to have these, negotiation with Nepal and Bhutan and India.
In due course. I think it's a great discussion. It's not kind of end of the discussion. We are just a starting point. Keep on discussing. But there's 2 to 3 things coming up. That is neither the Boon, neither the fully a Boon and not fully a Bane. It's somewhere in between. But the governments have so far showing little, I would say, proactiveness to make hydropower count. They're just seeing hydropower as an option, as a mode of extracting power. They're not considering the river. As Dr. Gyawali was pointing out, that they're not considering the river. They're not considering the ecological flow of the river. They're just considering the power. It's like sitting in the kind of tree and cutting this own self. So it's something, it's a suicidal, as not only I think this often on disaster like Uttarakhand, it's also a suicidal mode that governments in South Asia are progressing right now. Hydropower is important with this climate, with the thermal power going down, with nuclear power under question, under scanner, with solar power has its own limitation. Hydropower is definitely one of the options. But the governments in South Asia, Nepal, India, and others in South Asia need to look at it in a much more proactive and progressive manner from the environmental footprints point of view. Today, this far, and another day, another time. Thank you everybody for your very, very important contribution to this program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jayanta. Pleasure. Enjoy.
we are still speeding in the wrong direction. And the world has also emitted more than 200.
Welcome back to the Climate Channel. My name is Kenny.
Hi, my name is Sophia.
Hi, my name is Ifat. This week we have a new host joining us.
Hi, my name is Sylvia, and it's wonderful to be here.
We're so happy to have you as well. It's so nice to meet you. How was your day?
My day was great, actually. I went for a walk earlier today since the weather's great this winter.
Oh, for sure. One thing that I actually noticed this year is that there's so much less snow and it's so much warmer.
Yeah, we didn't actually have a lot of snow this year, and we didn't have much heavy snow either. This is a big difference for Canadians because usually we're known for having harsh and snowy winters.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Usually we have snow from October to April, but we barely got snow this year. The latest estimate is that the maximum amount of snow that collects on the ground each year in the non-alpine areas of North America has been deep 1980.
Stop, could you say that line again? Because you like glitched out.
Sure. Okay. Usually we have snow from October to April, but we barely got snow this year. The rate each year in the non-alpine areas of North America has been decreasing by 46 billion tons per decade since 1980.
I mean, it's not like I'm complaining that I'm getting less snow. I don't want to walk through snow every day to get to school.
No, this is a good thing. You should be worried because it's a really big impact on our environment. Since temperatures are rising, less snow is falling. So like, it isn't a good thing, guys. It's because of climate change.
Even though you might prefer the summer, we need to have a good balance between the warm and the cold weather. Snowfall is really important, especially in places that usually have a cooler climate, for example, the Arctic.
Oh, yeah, I agree. As we mentioned in the last episode, animal populations are decreasing and the habitats are melting away because it's so warm now.
Oh yeah, I heard something about polar bears that live in the Arctic, and the ice melting is actually putting them in danger because they don't have habitats. I think I actually saw a video online of a polar bear drowning.
Oh yeah, I saw the same video. It actually went viral, and it was essentially just a polar bear that was trying to stay afloat on ice, but all the ice was melted, so it was drowning, and its fur was so brown and matted, and it was so skinny. You could see its like bones. It was really heartbreaking.
Oh my God, that's crazy. And the increase in temperature is causing all the ice caps to melt. That's also bad for the fish because they require proper specific temperatures and water conditions. They'll leave their main spot to find conditions that suit their needs, which causes less food for polar bears and other animals since they rely on fish for food and go extinct due to the change in their food cycle. The monarch butterfly is also threatened because of the many disruptions to their migration caused by climate change. You know?
Oh yeah, and it's not only monarch butterflies, it's actually more than 1 million species that are at risk of extinction because of climate change.
Not only do these animals lose their habitat, their food, and other basic necessities that they need to survive, but it causes sea levels to rise faster than normal since all the melted ice flows from the lakes and oceans.
Yeah, actually, the sea levels are a problem for us too, because entire countries and cities are on the verge of disappearing because of the rising sea levels. Many smaller islands will be the first to go, like Tuvalu or the Maldives, but bigger countries will soon start to sink too if global warming continues. Cities like Dhaka, Bangladesh, and Houston, Texas are said to disappear by 2100. It's really scary.
Oh, for sure. Venice, Italy too.
We can't hear you, Saf. I heard Venice and then you cut off.
I know Sophia wanted to go to Venice, Italy.
Yeah, it was on her bucket list, but due to the overflowing levels of melted ice, there's so many floods that are happening, and it's causing so many natural disasters. Not just flooding, there's hurricanes and other things for countries that are near water due to overhumidity, like for Bangladesh and other South Asian countries.
And not only is there an abundance of water, but places like Australia had huge forest fires because the air is so dry and hot. The trees are practically matches waiting to be lit.
Oh yeah, earlier on social media, I heard about these wildfires that were happening in 2020. I remember seeing people going through severe consequences. Ifat, do you know what these places are doing right now?
These places are taking extra precautions to help prevent climate change. A lot of small islands had a drastic change in climate, so they are doing whatever they can to slow it down because it's like so severe, you know?
Currently, people are actually using a lot of fossil fuels. That's one of the problems. Things like coal and oil are being used on a daily basis in large amounts. Not only are we wasting these natural resources, but we're damaging our ozone layer in the process.
Some people might not understand what the ozone layer is. So does anyone want to explain what the ozone layer is?
I can do it. The ozone layer is a layer of gases that exist in the Earth's atmosphere. These gases are used to protect us from the sun and its harmful rays. Since we continue to burn fossil fuels and put greenhouse gases into the air, there are patches and holes in the ozone layer. This causes the ozone layer to let in harmful ultraviolet rays from the sun. This can harm plant growth and reduce agriculture.
This also directly harms humans because other UV and other harmful solar rays can cause many types of problems like skin cancer and immune deficiency disorders.
And don't forget wrinkles. I don't want to look 30 when I'm actually 20.
And this should be a big worry, as fossil fuels are the second most important source of electricity in Canada. About 9.5% of electricity supply comes from coal, 8.5% from a natural gas, and 1.2% from petroleum. Since a lot of our electricity supply comes from fossil fuels, what can we do to stop it?
We burn fossil fuels every day. Whether it's driving in cars or supporting large factories that produce pollution, we all contribute to the damage. However, these fossil fuels like coal and oil will run out eventually. So instead, we should use alternative sources of energy that people can use to help the environment that are reusable.
Actually, this isn't really Canada's problem because, as Ifat says, only about 9.5% of electricity comes from coal. So around only 19% of Canada's electricity comes from coal, gas, and oil. 81% is produced by clean energy things like hydro, nuclear, solar, or wind power, because Canada has the advantage of having Niagara Falls, which is a great source of hydroelectricity. So even though that we still have to cut back, this isn't really Canada's problem, but there's still things we must do.
And I know like Soph told me about like her car and her house. She said that she has solar panels installed in her house, and her family even owns a car that runs on battery. So I think other families should start doing that. That way our cars won't waste gas that can be used for other purposes. It also ensures we don't put more pollution into our air, you know?
Yeah, so Canada's problem isn't really not having renewable sources of energy, but we could still do things like this to help out.
I'm not really that, I don't really use reusable sources. So can you guys tell me where I can get these?
There are many reusable sources available. You can buy an electric or battery-powered car and buy solar panels, but the only downside is that it's extremely expensive.
These are all great ways for us to help stop global warming that we should remember after the show ends. But remember, it's not just regular civilians and cars and energy that's causing global warming. A huge, huge portion of global warming and greenhouse gases are caused by industrialization.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Factories release a lot of greenhouse gases like methane. In fact, 37% of the methane emission comes from factories and large corporations alone.
It's terrible that factories are doing that, even though they have the money to help fix it. Recently, I heard that the concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere as of mid 2020 is the highest it's been in human history.
Yeah, and I also heard from NASA data that the average global temperatures in 2019 were 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the 20th century average. In fact, the 5 warmest years in the 1880 to 2019 record have all occurred since 2015.
Yeah, all these damages and problems from global warming can all be traced back to humans. So we're the ones that are causing it. But that also means climate change can be slowed down if we all try and do our best.
Because of that, we need to understand why our Earth is warming up and how we can stop it by using the methods that we mentioned earlier.